Recording now. Welcome to all of those who were able to come to the live session, and this tool will be available for you to go back to as the recorded session. A great question just was posted that will be useful to all of you that are here live. Let's see, the question was that if you are attending now, do you also need to what do you need to do with recorded session? I will have record of each of you who has attended the live session, so that will be your participation in the engagement activity. So roll along with us here, and I'll get that recorded in the next day when I get everything set up for the recorded session. So anytime we have an engagement event that you're not able to attend, you can get participation credit from watching the recording and answering the questions. You don't have to worry about those additional questions if you're here live. So hopefully that's clear and you'll be set to get those. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up some of my files here to get us started. Find the right ones. All right, there we are. All right, so now instead of seeing me, you should be able to see our slide presentation, and I'm going to be working through our topic here. Our topic is about Module 2 and the APA assignments. But I wanted just to touch base on some other things that come up that are part of these modules or part of being in our human services program, and then we'll certainly dive into things with APA. The first is we're talking about writing, but we're talking about academic writing. We're talking about APA, and I'll give some more answers or insight to you of why we write in this manner with college work and why instructors ask you to learn to write this way. But writing communication is important in so many levels for us in human services. And one way that I'm just going to make encouragement to each of you as we're going through a really crazy, intense time here in our country or in the world, is how we can also use our writing communication just for our own personal self-care. And that's what you'll see posted here on this slide. This is not an assignment. This is something you can choose to do or not. But sometimes I know personally, if I am feeling overwhelmed and feeling at a point of not knowing how to calm myself to be able to even think and do the tasks or work in front of me, that journaling and writing can be a really helpful tool for that. And here are just some prompts so that if when you're settling in to do some of your homework for this class or another class and you find yourself just struggling to settle your mind, here are some prompts that I'd encourage you just to take a notebook and do some writing that no one else ever sees. Do some writing that you're just writing to yourself. The type of writing you can do where it doesn't matter that anyone's going to grade you. There's no concern if you're using proper grammar or not. You're just communicating between you and your notebook. So that's what those prompts are there, and I call it a positivity journal. If you wanted to do it every day that you're doing your homework, if you just wanted to take a pause during the week and do something like that, each would be, I think, valuable, especially when taking on a course during a summer semester and a summer like is going on right now. Okay, so moving on. The other topic that we look at as part of Module 2, that's not the focus really about this engagement event, but I wanted to make sure that we're looking at it, is one of the readings that you'll be doing on Module 2 talks about exploring human services. And here are some questions. These are questions that will mirror on your study sheet. These are some questions that will be valuable that when you're reading, if you haven't done all the reading with Module 2, to come away from this module being able to answer these things. being able to think about the places that human services work. Think about the types of jobs and the things that you're working on with your degree to be able to be doing. And as you're exploring these areas, read so you can be answering these for yourself. You'll certainly answer them for me in some quizzes and or some tests coming up, but really this is what you're wanting as takeaways of where are you going to be going with human services. Something also that you may be asking as you go forward is we're going to be looking at how these are changing. The world is changing right now. We have new types of jobs that are emerging with the pandemic that are going to be vital for human services workers. We have vital roles that are going to be happening as our communities shift and change to be responsive to the movements, to the Black Lives Movement, to the changes within our communities and the police systems, that there's going to be vital roles for us as human services professionals. So that's what that slide's about. I want to pause and just make sure everyone knows where we're at with our schedule. To do that, I'm going to pause from the slides and move to looking at our screen, take you into Blackboard. So you'll be looking and sharing my computer screen here, and we're going to go over and look at our course. So let me get on the right starting page. All right, so I'm going to go to the coursework button and I'm going to be scrolling down. We finished up Module 1 last week in our first engagement activity. So we are here with our second engagement activity. Module 2 is what to do today. You'll see the assignments include the study sheet and the checklist. A reminder that our study sheets are the tools that you'll be completing but not turning in. You'll use those instead for completing your first exam. And your checklist is where you'll report how you did with completing that. And then going on, you'll be doing your first draft of the mini APA paper. And I'll be talking in a moment about that project and what's involved with your first draft. So the words APA can be scary with that, and things like paper sound scary. So hopefully stick with me in this session and I can ease your mind on what's really involved with that. It's a much more of a checklist and a step-by-step process than maybe the terminology suggests. All right, so that's where we're at. Going to head back to our slides. Okay. Let me just make sure. All right. So everyone should now see a slide that is talking about APA fears. I took these phrases that you'll see here on your screen from our forum where you posted some of your questions that we're going to be going through. But I wanted just to address where we're at as students thinking about this word APA, that it sometimes feels like something that is uncomfortable, it is not natural for be using, and because of that, it can lend towards feeling like, what happens if I make a mistake? Or is all going to be zapped if I don't get a paper perfect? Or this big word about plagiarizing, and fear if I am doing that unintentionally. So as we go through these next slides and talking about what APA is, how you do it, and why we do it, I think we're going to be able to address these fears, that you're going to understand the reason why we give credit to the original authors, and if you're doing that, then you won't be plagiarizing. We're going to talk about how you use the guidelines for APA and what that is. So you'll be able to think like a writer, someone that is going to check in on the guidelines and follow those, and that they are as all encompassing or as um, overwhelming as sometimes it may seem, because we come at it not understanding and not fully knowing what the purpose is or why it happened. So I'm going to break these down, and then we'll have time to pause and see what fears are still remaining. So we're going to look at these questions, and we're going to kick off with these questions and then look at some how-tos and come back then and see what we're missing. We have, starting with, why does this come up? Why are instructors so hung up on saying write using a certain format? How do you do this? How do we make sure you're not going to lose points? Or what's going to happen if I can't set things up? Or how will this be graded if I'm not exactly understanding? So let's start with that. Why do we prefer to write in APA format? And not all classes do, but human services classes do, because APA stands for the American Psychological Association. There is also some other formats out there. You may have learned MLA or Chicago style with other classes. They are very similar. They are the same as in some areas that we all give credit back to original authors. The format for APA is because it's connected with the social sciences, and the social sciences that are strongly connected to psychology. They become the format that academics use. They become the format that researchers use. They come in the format that then college students use when you're taking those classes. How to do it, that second question, advice on how you do it, is how we've built this module and your assignments for the APA template. I encourage you to take the notes like are on the study sheet for this module. I encourage you to use the sites and tools that I'm going to introduce to you in this presentation, and you'll have those to return to, and you can save them. You can come back to them for your other classes. I'm going to show you some ways that you can double check yourself with those tools. And then to know that each instructor is going to be different on how they grade if you're following this. A key thing is that you attempt to be giving credit back. That's what we do to ensure that we don't plagiarize. If we're using someone else's idea, we're going to give credit back. If you do it but miss some commas or periods or some minor details, then minor points are taken off. If you write but don't give any credit back, then larger amounts are taken off. So hopefully that helps to give us a starting point for thinking about why we do APA and why is it looked at as important. It's not the only thing that's important in your writing, but it is one thing. We're going to later look at some of your specific how-tos that you raised about how to use APA, and that you'll be able to walk away of knowing the answers to those. So I'm going to move forward from that slide, but know that we'll be coming back to make sure we cover each of those. Framing this also about why do we cover this? As human service professionals, you're going to be responsible for following guidelines. So some examples of what those might be. You may need to work with someone and they have to follow the guidelines for Social Security, or they may be following the guidelines to become eligible for the SNAP nutrition program, or the guidelines so they can stay at your shelter that night, or the requirements so that you can keep getting a nonprofit grant, or guidelines so that you can bill Medicaid so you can provide a mental health service. So over and over again, you're going to be asked to know what rules are and follow those guidelines. And they'll come in long lists, they'll come in trainings, they'll come in books that you'll read, they'll come in papers that your bosses will give you, but that it's a regular skill that you need to know that you're going to be given some guidelines to work with, and then you perform within those guidelines. That's what you're doing here. As a student, you're going to have guidelines with your writing, because writing's something that students do a lot. And you'll transfer then your wiring that you'll do in your brain to how you might do this then in a work setting. I had mentioned that APA is what we use in the social sciences. American Psychological Association is what it stands for, and it's the guideline that we use for keeping our communication, when it's academic communication, in a certain format that everyone's able to recognize and easily then be able to communicate from one researcher to another, from one college student to a professor. You're going to learn about it with a whole bunch of tools that you'll have in this class. So your textbook has a whole section that has some reference places. Your study sheet has places that you're going to transcribe those. And now I'm going to show you a folder that we have that's in this class that gives you a lot of all additional tools. So I'm going to pause and we're going to switch again to looking at our screens. If I can get my computer to work. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now and show you where in the class there's going to be this additional folder. All right, so coming up here, if you go to coursework, at the top now is a folder called APA Help and Tutors. I listed some different places you can go to get help connected with our college. We have a phone number that goes to our reference desk. I apologize, I didn't check how they're working that right now during the COVID restrictions, but that's a phone number that typically you can reach one of our librarians. We have a learning center that is now where you can go to also schedule a time to meet one-on-one with a tutor, and they're ready to help you. You don't need to go in to meet with them. Instead, they're doing it now all online, that you would talk with them on the phone and use your computer to connect with that. There's a phone number here, and there's a place then that they'll direct you that you'll sign up using TutorTrack to schedule a time with somebody. We've had a reading and writing center, which has a phone number also, so when our campuses are open, you can do drop-in to talk with them. And then we move on down, we have our online writing lab, which is a website dedicated for giving you the information about writing. If you scroll down, they have a whole section here on APA and APA style. And you just scroll down, you can get the formatting style. And they go on down to the basics or authors, or I can't remember how I do this for electronic, for a website. I'll tell you honestly, I don't have this information memorized. I've been working as a student and in academics for a long time, and I instead memorized that I have places to go. Someone had asked, how do you set up for 2 authors? Well, I go to a site, I check the reference list for authors. There's how I do for 1 author. There's how I do for 2 authors. So the difference is that and symbol and then last name and initials. All right, so that's another resource of checking. Here is a sample paper, which I think if you're like me, sometimes I just need to see the whole thing in action. So here's a place that you can open up and find a whole paper with notes of how they've set up first page, the abstract, and you can see inside how they did citations, and you can go all the way to the end and see how they set up a whole reference list. So when the whole thing is just not making sense, I like to look at a big picture. And then tools, copies of these are also in our folder for the APA paper assignment, but these are some of the most helpful videos. You can see this one's in 4 minutes, this one's in 6 minutes. I think it's actually a 5-minute. They tried to keep it under 4 minutes, but still very short, that someone opens up and shows you step by step how to click on and start your paper, how to make the margins work, how to make a running head. Again, don't have to memorize it. Use a Google instruction video, start and stop it, and make your paper match that. One is if you're using Microsoft Word, but I've had some students sometimes instead use Google Docs, and there's a whole example of how to be using it there. So great, great resources. So where are all those? In coursework, there's a folder here for APA help and tutors. Same things are also down here in our project folder. So you don't have to worry that, do I have to go and look at both of them? The same thing is right there inside there. That makes sense. Okay, so there's APA online, and I just copied it so you can get to them a couple different ways. All right. Well, hopefully that made sense and was helpful. Coming back to our slide. On your study sheet, I asked you to take notes and answer these type of questions. Well, where are you going to find the answers for these? Again, it's that list I just shown you. I give you some of these answers right in your textbook that you can copy over into your study sheet. But if those aren't making sense, you can go to any of those tools that I just showed you. So you're going to be a little bit of a problem solver here. There's not one right place to get your answer, but you're going to be digging into the tools that you've been given to find those answers. So the first one here was APA style guidelines, and why do we use those? Well, we use them because they're the format that is recognized for our academic field. Why do we think it's important to know them? Well, it's going to get you started well for writing in this course and your later psychology and sociology courses. If you're going on to get your 4-year degree from Winston-Salem State or UNCG, you'll be ready and prepared for those upper level classes. You'll use it again for some of your additional human services classes while here at Foresight Tech. And you'll be ready then to also use research as it comes out as a professional. And you'll be able to find it and understand it better, understanding how they've organized their research. I'm going to let these next questions be ones that you can use the tools that I've shared with you. But if you're getting stuck on any one of those, that would be valuable to reach out to me and see, tell me there you've looked and what hasn't made sense so we can make sure you have the right answers for that. We also ask on the study sheet something about what's a running header. I'm going to show you in a moment what that is, because sometimes that trips us up. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next slides about what plagiarism is, because that also sometimes can be misunderstood. So, running header, I am going to show you. Okay, pulling it up. Let's see if I can get an example with this. So, hang on a moment. I'm going to pull up. All right, so I'm going to show you an example of a running header. So let's go back. I'm going to move to share my screen. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now, and you'll see in front of me a line that's going across the top of the page. That's the running head. You see as it's going down, it's the same one that is on each page. Sometimes we'll see an example that will put the words running head colon and then the title there. But it is a running head's a shortened version of the title. It appears on every page. It's written in all capital letters and it's flush. That means it's all lined up over here to the margins on the left. All right. And there's some directions of what it is. So the running head is a part that we put up here. What that allows is if you're ever pulled out for a separate page of the page, you can see where it keeps showing up along here, you'll be able to tell that it all joins up with the same paper. Historically, I think we put it in there if you ever dropped a paper and all the pages, if it was a printed paper and all the pages fell out, we could put it together. Now, how do you make that? My answer to you is that you use one of these videos if you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and the gentleman who is giving that video walks you through exactly where to click and how you build that. You can also check in with tutors to assist you with how to use the logistics for typing something to put it in your margins. All right, so going back to our slides. And we talk about plagiarism. Key things to know about plagiarism. A big word for a very important topic that is a lot simpler than sometimes we make it out to be. Plagiarism is the first point on that slide, handing in your own work for something you did not write. So let's imagine that you have a paper due for your sociology class and you go online and you purchase someone else's work and you erase their name and hand it in as your own. Or you steal a paper from your roommate and erase their name and copy yours in it and turn it in and pretend it's your own work. Everyone really can understand why we wouldn't do that. That's fraud. That's cheating. That's claiming to do something that wasn't your own work. Straightforward. So that makes sense to most people when they're learning this word and understanding plagiarism. The second one on the list sometimes is understood, sometimes it's can trip us up. It's when you might take a part of what someone has written and copy it over word for word without giving the writer credit. So this is if I went to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter's, Sorcerer and Stone, and I copied the first page out of there and never said that it came from J.K. Rowling or came from that author. I'd be cheating. I'd be claiming their words and not giving them credit back. But if I wanted to talk about what was in there in my paper, I could certainly put that person's words in my paper. I just need to put it in quotation marks and give credit back. That's what citing it is. The APA format is just the order we give credit back and how we line up the words and how we line up the names. But the process is that we're given credit back. Now, the third one on this list is also the one that can be more of the one that probably triggers our fears or makes us unsure if are we doing this or not. So when in doubt, we want to give credit back. Whenever we use someone else's ideas, we want to make sure to back it up. So even if we change the order of the words, even if we paraphrase, we still need to give credit back that the original idea, the original research, the original thoughts came from that other person. And we would still cite that in our papers. It also, when we're doing college work, it makes us look smarter. So if I'm talking about the best techniques for stress management, and I'm just making them up or not giving credit back to all these great experts that are out there, what I'm writing doesn't look as, it makes as much, it's not as valuable. But if I said, here, let's talk about stress management. Here are 5 great techniques. First technique, it's from this important researcher from Harvard. I'm going to cite and give their name and explain what the technique is. Then the second one, it's been researched by 100 different doctors, and it works great on reducing blood pressure when someone's stressed. And I'm going to give credit back. Now it looks also like I'm talking about something that makes sense. So those are reasons that we give credit back. We want to make sure that we are backing up to make ourselves and what we're writing about be backed up and it looks like it's smart. We also don't want to ever take credit for someone else's work that wasn't our own. I'm going to pause there and check in about and ask you to type any questions that you have related to any of that. So anything I've talked about thus far that didn't make sense, or if it all makes sense, just go ahead and type in that, give me a thumbs up or all's good. Okay, so I got Jessica's good. Is this working for them? Okay. All right, and I'm not sure if the typing in is working for everyone on their on phone. All right, good. So that sounds great, Jessica. The links are helpful. I look forward to being able to use those. Okay. I know sometimes with working in Blackboard Collaborate that it doesn't work for everyone's way of coming in to type in. So I'm going to trust, since I aren't seeing any other questions, that we're ready to go ahead. So let me pull back. And we're going to talk a little bit here on. Okay. So an important point when thinking about APA is that there's a couple different parts. One is just setting up your paper. So the formatting, the margins, the headers, the titles. My best tip for that is use those Google how to or the YouTube videos that I've included in the class, in the folders in Blackboard. Second parts are distinguishing between in-text citations and a reference list. Sometimes we mix these parts up and think we've got it covered by doing one but not the other. And we need to have both of them when we're doing college writing. Um, oh, no problem, Ty. Glad that this is coming together for you. So thank you. So when we think about APA, this slide of the citations and the reference list. So citations, what are they? They're when we give credit back within our writing. So this is the part while you're writing your paper within your text, you would cite where it came from. The reference list, on the other hand, is the longer description of the source that comes at the end of your paper. So citations are inside the text you're writing. Reference list is at the end. When do you do a citation? Whenever you have an idea that was not your idea. You'll back it up with who was the original author. When do you list that source on a reference list? Anytime you included them as a citation, you'll then include it on your reference list. So if I'm reading your paper and I see that you cited Jones, 1992, I will then be able to go to the end of your paper and find out where I could find Jones's article or Jones's book. So anytime you talk about a source inside your text, that source has got to be on your reference list. Why do we include a citation in the text? Because we got to give credit back on our writing. Give a credit back to the statistic, the detail, the idea. Why do we do the reference list? So the reader, so it could be your professor, it could be a peer, it could be someone else who wants to read your material, knows where they can go look up that article or that book. How do you do it? This is where you just follow those details. You look it up on the APA guidebook and you find it for a citation or for a reference, you find it on the reference list. Now, let me pause and see the question here. I had a question posed. Okay, so James asked me about an email. Jimmy, I will check back. I don't recall that I did. So if you ever get the questions about a missing email, if you ever email me and don't get an answer back in that first 48 hours, assume that it may have gotten lost or in a list, so resend it to me. So go ahead and resend that one to me. All right, so checking on about when you would not cite. We don't need to give credit back when something is so common that 100 different authors would write about it. So something that's so common that we don't have to back it up. The sky is blue. 100 different writers are going to tell us that, so we could not back that up. Foresight Tech is a community college. We don't have to back that up. You also don't have to give credit if it's your own idea or opinion or if it's an experiment or research study that you did. Otherwise, we'll give credit back. So anytime that you must cite when the ideas are unusual and not your own, anytime it's the results of some sort of study or experiment, anytime it's quotations, or anytime, this is the last one that kind of trips us up, if you paraphrase it, you summarize what someone wrote and then didn't use exact quotations, you still give credit back. So if you didn't write it first, just admit that and give them credit back. So here's an example, and so we understand that we have both citations or reference lists. What you see in front of you, this would be an example of a citation because it's a sentence that gives credit back to this author, Newkrug. It tells what he wrote about, and we include the page number because it was actually an exact quotation. Or we might do a long quotation, and we'd use this format, but this is a citation. And another long one. Actually, that's a bad slide because it didn't line up well, so I'm just going to move on from that. And if it's a paraphrase, it might look something like this, but it's still a citation. And there's another example where it's not word for word quote, but we give credit back. So paraphrase. But a reference list is different. The reference list isn't a citation. It's the sources at the end of your paper. So sometimes an instructor might say, well, I need to have so many sources. And then they'll say, well, I gave you 3 sources at the end, but the instructor said, well, you didn't have any citations in your paper. I meant 3 sources with citations. That's why it's important to understand what a citation is and what a reference list is. So why do you include a reference list? So you can have the longer information about the source so the reader can go look it up for themselves. They have a really good citation about an experiment or a study. They want to go read the whole study. That's what your reference list tells them where to do it. What sources should be on your reference list? It should always be the ones that you included inside your text. Sometimes I've had students give me citations of Jones and Smith in their paper, and then they include a long reference list, but they don't include Jones or Smith on there. It should always match up. Your reference list, then you'll list it alphabetically. It'll be alphabetically by the last names. But sometimes if you have a source that doesn't have a named author, then it'll be the first letter of that listing, and it'll include a hanging indent. And I want to be sure to show you a hanging indent. So let's see if I can get our example up here. All right. So bringing from your textbook, there's a page like this in your textbook that I give a source like it would include on your reference list, but it's indented here. And it's indented not on the first line like a paragraph, but it's indented on the second and the following lines. That's how we do a list on a reference list. You would also see it at the end of a paper. All right, I'm going to show you a page here. All right, going to switch screens so you can see another example. If you see in this paper here, Here is a list of all the person's sources, and it starts with alphabetically, but there's only one line that's out to the left per source, and then there's a hanging indent. And then we get to the next source, and then there's a hanging indent, and so on. All right, so those are all authors' names. See how we get all those different sources, and the way they move to the next source is when there's a new line that's out to the left. Okay, so going back to our slides. Okay, so as part of your assignments, you're going to be figuring out how you list a book, how you list a journal, how you list a website. Again, I'm going to refer you back to those list of resources that are either in your textbook or you have links for in Blackboard that you're going to search for this. You don't need to panic that you can't remember how to do each one of these. But if you understand that there's a guideline for each, then your role is to problem solve to find the answer. Sometimes it can be consulting with someone. So librarians, we have those with our college, but the public libraries also can be a good, helpful source. You'll have tutors that can help you, and you'll have your own books and study sheets to help you. You'll sometimes be asked by instructors to use peer-reviewed journals. I'm going to talk briefly about what these are, and then this may come up again as we're working on the APA papers. Peer-reviewed is a type of academic article. It is backed up by researchers. So sometimes just one author can write something and it may be fake news. It may not make any sense. But a peer-reviewed journal, or sometimes refereed journals, are called scholarly journals. This is when experts in that field are backing up each other. And if they write this great psychological research paper and submit it to the journal, then it's going to be read by another 10 of their peers that are experts also in that field. And they're going to check it out and say, did that study make sense? Did they do all the things that they were supposed to do, so we can say that this is really a good study? Or if it's not, they won't put it in their journal. We also may be getting some of our sources from newspapers or magazines. Sometimes those reporters may be going and talking to experts, but they often aren't experts in the field. So we need to be careful about sometimes using newspapers or magazines for our academic papers. Journals instead are going to be written by researchers. They're going to be people that are an expert on that topic. So when you're working on college papers, the more experts you can get backing up your paper, the smarter it sounds. All right. So peer-reviewed is where the science will be behind that. And you sometimes, when you can be going to a library, you can talk to someone that I want to get peer-reviewed journals, and they can help you with finding those. Also now with our online research, we can look for places that specifically list peer-reviewed journals. And we'll be talking more about how you can find those. So there's an example of a book, how it would look on a reference list, except it's missing a hanging indent. That should be indented over here on the left. Otherwise, everything looks correct there. There's an example of a website, and good, there's the hanging indent. But sometimes you might come to a website that doesn't have an author. So this one, they mean last name, first initial, middle initial, the year, the date it was published, the title, and the URL, that's the website address. But many times the second one listed there, you'll find that it is the title. You won't have a specific date. That's what you put ND for. And then you need to tell us at least where you got it and the website that you got it from. All right. Last thing I want to go over is to help simplify what you're going to be working on your APA template this week. Your paper is going to have 3 pages. It's not a research paper, it's a template. It will have a title page. It will have your practice page. It will include a heading, the running head. It's going to have 1 paragraph, and in that paragraph, it's going to have 3 citations. Then page 3 will be the reference page. It'll have 3 sources. That's all that you're submitting. Sometimes I get students really not believing that it's a template and will want a topic that they're writing on. But that's not what we're doing for this assignment. We're practicing using the guidelines, practice problem solving, so we can get a template of how our academic papers should look. I'm going to pull up the assignment. Let's get it here. Okay, so I'm going to go back and we're going to look at our screen, or my screen rather. And when you go to coursework and roll down to the first draft of the mini APA paper, be sure to read this. This goes over exactly what I just shared. This is your first draft. It's just the 3 pages. The directions are right here. I'll open those up in just a second. I ask that you follow that direction sheet. Check in with me if you have questions. Some of you are joining in right now in this help session. And know that I will give you 100% on this first draft if you attempt each step that's in these directions. You're going to submit then your first draft, make a good attempt at each one, because that'll help you on your second draft. I will grade it that you've made an attempt on each step. I'll give you feedback, and then it's on your second draft that you're going to consult with a tutor and make any edits. You'll see here I give a template example, so that would be helpful for you. And I gave you the directions. So we're going to open up. All right. So when you look at these directions, you see what I want on the title page. So you make an attempt at all of those parts. On page 2, you make an attempt at all those parts. And then on page 3 of your paper, you include 3 sources and you make an attempt to set those up. I'm going to be looking and telling you on your first draft which of those 12 things you got right or that you need to keep working on. So there's your checklist. Make an attempt on getting the font. Make an attempt on getting the margins right. Make the attempt on getting a title page set up. Make an attempt on including a running header. Make an attempt on including numbering. Include a citation of a direct quote. Include a citation of a paraphrased reference. Set up your reference page. Include a reference list for the book, for the website, for the journal, and make an attempt on getting your spelling correct on your paper. Do all those things, you're going to be set for 100% on your first draft. Oops. All right. Okay, so coming back, I thought I had clicked out of the wrong thing there. All right, so coming back on our slides. All right, so what we are tackling this week is completing a study sheet that will be your tool ongoing in this class, and then you'll do the checklist for Module 2, telling me how your work went on Module 2. You'll be doing your first project for our mini APA paper template and making an attempt for each step on the directions and using those resources that are in the folder on Blackboard. And I'm going to check back and make sure then that we've answered all of our questions. So when citing APA format in a textbook, do I cite the textbook or the cited reference or both? So I'm looking at question 1 on this slide. You'll want to, your best practice is going to drill down to the original source. But if you don't have that, citing the textbook will work. You want to first make sure you're giving credit back. Use the original source when possible. If you don't have enough to show the original source, use the textbook. Second question was given about how do we give credit back to organizations? You'll want to make sure, since each of those organizations, so such as the World Health Organization or Centers for CDC, Centers for Disease Control, because of acronyms aren't always known by every reader, you'll want to write them out. So the World Health Organization, and you'll want to refer us to their specific document. So in the text, if you would do an in-text citation, just like it's shown here. You would say Centers for Disease Control, or you'd say CDC, and then on your reference list, you'd write out the Centers for Disease Control 2018, and you would tell us the exact document that you were referring to. Question 3, how will I cite a source if the author or publication date is missing? This is when you'll use those examples I gave you, such as ND, if there's no date. Or if the author's not available, you'll use the title. That's a lot to memorize. How do I do it if this or if that? What I do each time, if I get a situation that is outside of the usual, I'm typically citing authors, but I get one that has no author, I'm going to go back to those tools that I showed you. I'm going to use that OWL tool and look up how do I do it. Just like you'll do as a human services professional when you don't know how to apply a certain guideline. I'm going to look it up and follow those directions. Still doesn't make sense? I'm going to talk to an expert. I'm going to call a librarian. I'm going to talk to a tutor. I'm going to check in with someone so that I make sure I'm doing it right. I think I gave an example of showing when there was 2 authors. Again, same thing, you would look that up. How do I cite a web source if the author is listed as a web source and not a person? I'll refer to often a website might have a name for their website. So I'll refer to that. So it might be Psychology Today, although they're probably authors on that site. But I'll use the web source, and then I'll want to give it an example. I want to give the exact page that it's on. So again, I'm going to go back to those sources and look up how do you use a website. On the reference pages, when putting your references in alphabetical order, do you go by the authors? First, you always use the authors. If there's no author, then it's the article. So the author's last name is your first go-to on the alphabetical. And 7, when citing a website, what do you do if you cannot find the author's name of the article? So very similar question to number 3. That's going to come up for you with websites. You're first going to want to do a little bit of research and see if there's a person behind that website. So sometimes it's a blog that you know everything's written by that author. It might be that you're scrolling to the bottom of the page or checking somewhere inside the article. If it's not possible, then you're going to have it without an author's name and just the title. You'll remember that sources may be stronger sources if they come with authors. So that might also be a sign that it's not as strong a source to be using for your academic papers. All right, that was a lot of information we went through on our slides. Let's pause and do any closing questions, anything that we want to wrap up with. Okay, so Jessica has no questions. Anyone else have any to add? All right, and I know not everyone's able to type in or get those posed. All right, I am going to wrap it up there. Thanks for those who were able to attend this live. Thanks for everyone for posing your questions. I know some of my answers may have been clearer than others. That's going to be not your reason to say, oh, she didn't make sense, and give up on problem solving or give up on trying to figure out how to make sense. Instead, ask more questions. So you're going to have ways to try out everything. You can still reach out to me individually by email. We can talk by phone on any of the assignments. And then know that we won't be wrapping up with this. This is our first step to figuring things out. You're going to be doing that first draft. I'm going to give you feedback, and you're going to start also practicing using with some of the tutors. So we're going to make this topic feel much more comfortable by the time we get to the end of the semester. All right, so Great Tight posed a great question that she may have some when she gets started on the assignment this week. That makes a lot of sense, so please reach out to me, and I'll be there to help point you in the right directions. All right, so everyone stay safe and keep plugging along. I'm looking forward to working with you.